Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Health and Wellness. And today we have another part of our series with Dr. Laurel Mellin. She is a health psychologist, a clinical professor of medicine at UC San Francisco, and the founder of EBT, Emotional Brain Training. And today we are going to be talking about burnout. I know that burnout is a big issue in our world right now. And Laurel is going to be sharing some tools to help you get control of that challenge in your life so that you can be less burnt out, more in control, and more productive. So Laurel, thank you again for joining me today.
Well, Gina, it's always so wonderful to be with you. And it's funny, I just had a major article come out today for a company called Wellcoa, which does worksite wellness on burnout. So it's interesting that that's one of our topics today. And the reason that's so shocking is that an American Psychological Association study showed that 88% of US workers had actually had burnout, and 56% of them experienced it at least monthly.
Really?
So we have crossed over out of a normal kind of a balance. It's called homeostatic stress levels into the toxic stress is now the norm. Toxic stress is the norm. And then you go to work and other people are stressed out. So, stress shows up different ways. It shows up as a false high. So some of the people you work with might be on this stress high. They're stressed. They might be high, but they're going to be low that night. They're going to fall apart in the evenings, or they're just numb. And they look like they're just fine. They're sort of placid, but they're overthinking, overanalyzing, making lists. That's stress. Or typically the emotional style of stress is to go low. You usually know it because you're anxious or you're hostile or you're having outbursts. Yeah. This is all high level stress. And that's what's happening in the United States right now. And so as much as it's very exciting to look at different chemicals and the different body organs and say, okay, what's really going on here? The controller of our burnout, we only have one controller, and that's our prefrontal cortex, our consciousness right behind our forehead. That's our only hope for making the good decisions and changing our physiology throughout the day so that we can get out of that toxic stress, back to a state of connection, well-being, in the flow, and a sense of joy. And that's why it's so important to me to talk about burnout with the brain-based health movement. So essentially, instead of over-relying on medications or trying to force ourselves to, I really should exercise. If you're burned out, you're not going to exercise. You're not going to do what you know you should do because you can't. Your brain will not let you. So what we're going to do is, instead of fighting our brain, we're going to learn how our brain actually works, and simple emotional tools that you can use on the spot throughout the day. It only takes 2 to 4 minutes to move out of that toxic stress to feeling good or even great. And that's what we need right now, because the number one underlying cause of these diseases we're experiencing is physiologic stress. It's brain stress in the emotional brain. So we've got to take charge of it. We've got to up our game. We can't just be mindful. We can't just think our way out of it. We can't just use gratitude and nice thoughts, because these states of high level stress are really strong emotionally. They're going to take us really into hostility, depression, anxiety, numbness, false highs, and we need powerful tools to clear it. And that's just what we do with brain-based health. I want to show you more about that. May I?
Yes, please do.
Great. I'm going to go back to this idea that when you think about all that's going on inside of you, the controller of our lives is really is really our brain. And so if we can take charge of our brain, then what's going to happen is we're going to take charge of our physiology. I just want to be real clear. We have a neocortex, or thinking brain, real good, but its number one job for survival of the species is to tune in to how stressed the emotional brain is. That's its number one job for us to survive. And in order to do that, we've got to be connected to knowing whether we're stressed or not and how stressed we are. And that's a skill that you can learn. And so in order to get past burnout, we need to be able to clear the stress throughout the day. We can't just live with it. I was doing a coaching this morning to a man who was in Texas, and he is on the graveyard shift in his job. And he was working with his brain-based health app, and he says, my schedule's different. I never know what my schedule is going to be. I mean, total and complete chaos. And so I showed him how to use it, and he said, oh, you mean I can do this in 2 to 4 minutes between patients? Oh my gosh. So the idea is you don't have to just endure stress once it happens. You can cut it. You can cut through it, clear it away, but you can't do it by thinking or being aware. You've got to use it by using emotional tools, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so the first thing is you say, okay, I know there's a lot of things I could do, medications, we want to do all the medications we need, procedures, absolutely, but if we can possibly put a floor in our body and brain to get out of the ditch of stress, all those medications and procedures are going to go so much better, and some of them we might not even need. And this is the basic information. There are 5 different levels of stress in your emotional brain. And that's just evolutionary biology. Essentially, if we're really, really racing away from a hungry tiger, we have to not think, but just run. And that means the reptilian brain at the very bottom here at 5 is going to be in charge. In fact, we don't want to think, because if we thought, we'd probably get so scared, we'd probably die on the spot. And so the thinking brain, which is up here, the prefrontal cortex over here, goes offline. So when we're in 4 and 5, the lower parts are very given to extremes, and we don't think our way through them. We just do whatever we do and did before, programmed to reflexively respond. They're in charge. Up to 3, limbic brain, up to 2, and then the neocortex here. So there's 5 different brain states, 5 different brain areas in charge, 5 different sets of memories, and 5 different emotional tools. So one of the psychiatrists who takes EBT at UCSF was saying, oh, I get it. Stress management isn't one size fits all. You have to have 5 tools or it's not going to work. Stress management does work by thinking and being aware at 1 and 2, but now there's studies at NYU that have shown that the reason that we have an epidemic of stress-induced problems in our country, we used to have infectious diseases, then we had chronic diseases, now we have stress diseases, is because the thinking brain kind of techniques that we thought would work, it turns out they work absolutely great when we don't need them, when we're in stress levels 1 or 2. When we're at 3, 4, and 5, particularly 4 and 5, they just go offline. You know, the prefrontal cortex is offline and the thinking and mindful skills are offline, and we're just stuck repeating the same patterns that we did before. 5 different levels of stress. So here's where it gets really exciting, is that everyone, I mean, today, if you think about your day, there must have been a moment. Maybe it was that you smelled a flower, or somebody was kind to you, or you pet your dog, or whatever you did, you were at brain state 1, where you're feeling great. And notice the brain is organized horizontally. So most health problems tend to be, is it a relationship problem? Is it a behavior problem? What's going on here? But the brain says, okay, if this area is in charge, everything's going to be fantastic. And then not quite so good, getting a little iffy. And now we're down into the 3, 4, and 5 area, which is toxic stress overload. Now remember, stress can be good for you. It's normal to be in all 5 brain states in any given day. And what happens is, if you go down just for a little bit, you break up all the old expectations and thoughts you had before. And what happens is that's where you're creative. That's where you make your breakthroughs. You want to dip down into 4 or 5, and then you want to spiral back up to 1. That is the best possible thing for your health, because you're training your brain to be resilient. You're getting rid of the old, outmoded expectations and ideas and making ways to update them. So you're getting ahead of your stress. But unfortunately, this is what's really important, and really, really important to know, is that the circuits down at 4 and 5, they're not these sweet, nice, self-balancing circuits like 1 and 2, which are called homeostatic. They're called allostatic, which is a word that's kind of a strange word, but what it means is that this is part of who we are, so that when things get bad, we will do whatever it takes to survive. We don't care what happens next week. We don't care how it affects other people. We're just going to be on the spot doing whatever extremes are necessary, as if we were needed to do that in order to survive. Now, with our hunter-gatherer relatives, ancestors, Well, they only got eaten by a lion once. But in modern day, most of our stress is psychological. We can get triggered 5 or 10 times a day. And the problem is in this 4 and 5 level here, these wires get stuck on, and they don't get unstuck by thinking or relaxing. And it'll take 30 minutes to 3 hours to do what you can do if you process your emotions in 2 to 4 minutes. So we just get stuck there. I mean, who has 30 minutes to 3 hours in the middle of the day to try to de-stress? So when they get stuck, it starts to become a habit of the brain. And the set point, your set point or my set point, is the biggest predictor of our health. And if our set point is in stress, and it's in 3, 4, or 5, and we're in the stress habit, we're going to get more burnout. We're going to get locked in. And the brain actually believes that feeling terrible is good, because whatever doesn't kill us, it likes. So when we get around other people that are negative or feeling bad about themselves or using a lot of artificial rewards and thinking that's fine to use lots of addictions to different things, everyone does it, so what's the difference? But what happens is when we're in those states, we miss out on the sweetness of life. And what humans really, really need is love and purpose. And when the prefrontal cortex is offline because we're at 3, 4, or 5, we can't find that loving connection. We, instead of treating people lovingly, we treat them like objects, because that's what our brain is telling us to do. And then we feel bad about ourselves because we've lashed out or because we were judging. So the first thing to do, if you're thinking about burnout, is stop judgments. When you're at 4 or 5 and I'm at 4 or 5, I'm telling you, you're going to do extreme thoughts, extreme emotions, way high, low, or numb. Whatever behavior seems to get you out of the ditch in that moment, that's normal because the prefrontal cortex is offline. And then when that gets to be a habit of the brain, that's when we get into these states. Now, how do you get out of burnout? How do you prevent it? Well, when you're at these high states of 1 or 2, like that, where you're feeling connected and a sense of well-being, you're feeling that glow in your body, that is the healing chemicals. When you're at 4 and 5, it's the harmful chemicals. When you're at 1 or 2, it's raising your set point up, so it's easier just to stay in that connection. And when you're stuck down there at 4 or 5, you're getting your set point lower. So what do? You train the brain to be resilient. You just start right where you are. If you have at 5, where you're at 5 all the time, you definitely need, everything you can get. Get medications, get out external support, get anything you can to get up to about a 4 or 4 and a half, where things start to get a little bit better. But this is why the app is so important, because you keep it with you and you put the brain of the app right at the top, so that anytime you don't feel good, you just bring it out. You just take the 2, 3, 4 minutes. It's all in your head. No one knows you're doing it, except you go from feeling like this to, oh. And even if it only lasts a moment of that state of connection, what we call joy, it's spreading healthy chemicals throughout your brain and body. Healthy chemicals. You're self-medicating naturally with healthy chemicals when you get to 1. So you actually keep track of how many times you got to that state, and you can celebrate it. So let me show you how it works. So we took all of that information, we put it into an app, because there's 5 different levels of stress, 5 different emotional tools, because it's a different brain area in charge. And so you essentially, through your day, you think not so much, am I burned out or not, but what's my stress level? What's my number? And once you know your number, like for example, yesterday we had a terrible plumbing problem, and we had unthinkable things in our washing machine. I mean, it was just like grotesque. And I was at 5, and I didn't even reach for the app. I just thought, this is just so disgusting. I can't believe it. So what I did is I was at 5, and I said, oh, I get it. I'm at 5. I'm going to be judgmental. I'm going to be nasty. I'm going to have a lot of nasty things to say. And well, that's just how it is. So even knowing your brain state and accepting it can give you a sense of connection and well-being. So here's how it works. You keep this with you all the time. 3 times a day, when you really want to feel your best, you're going to set your alarm so that you're going to be able to check in and spiral up. But the rest of the time, you take your stress seriously. because the root cause of all these problems is stress, and no one can do it for you. It's a personal decision to process out that stress, to clear away the toxic stress, like clutter. That's what you want to do. So you take a deep breath when you're not feeling well, go right to the number, choose a number. Most of the time you're going to be at 4. It'll take you right through the process, just takes a couple of minutes, and you'll come out the other side. If you are really, really stressed, you might need to use more than one tool, but still it's about 2 to 4 minutes. And at that point, you're going to feel a little bit of a glow. Even a momentary glow is chemically very impactful. And then you celebrate it because you just scored a joy point. So more and more people want brain-based health. They say, I want to use all the best medications and procedures and therapy and do everything else, but I want to put an emotional floor in my life so I can bounce back and be resilient all by myself in real time throughout the day. And so this is a community. The science is right here on the website, What is Brain-Based Health? And there are groups and there's apps and there's a community around. Let's use the skills we have to live our best life. So that's the idea, essentially. We are going to essentially take charge of our health and our chemistry by processing our stress throughout the day in just little bits, 2 to 4 minutes.
So essentially what we need is the app.
Yes.
You mentioned the app, and it's on, on any cell phone. I have an Android. I'm not an Apple user, and I'm able to get it. Other people have Apples and they're able to get it. And so it's called Brain-Based Health. Is that correct?
Brain-Based Health by EBT. So the concept is we're going to use our brain the way it was intended to be used, the highest and best purpose, clear away that stress. And the tools that allow that to happen are based on the emotional brain and how to take charge of those resiliency pathways in your emotional brain.
I love that there are resiliency pathways. And I think one of the things that I wanted to say, having been someone who uses EBT, is it's different than anything you've ever done. So it's important that you give it some time, trust the process, lean into the process, and it creates a shift that may or may not be super obvious. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to take a pill and be numb, or I'm going to take a pill and not feel the thing. It's more of a shift, an internal shift. That's how I, as a user of EBT, that's how I would explain the experience.
Thank you for that. And that's what we're looking for. Everyone knows what they should do. They know what they should eat, drink, sleep, exercise, and no one can do it because there's so much stress. We go to 4 or 5. When we change those circuits in the brain, they're at the bottom, and we switch them up, so they start being circuits that help us be resilient. What happens is the most common thing is to say, oh, that's interesting. I went for a walk today. I wonder why I did that. Or I didn't eat quite as much. Or, gosh, I actually felt much more compassion in my heart. It just came about. It's because the emotional brain is the controller of our circuitry and who we really are. And when we change that circuitry, we become more loving, more compassionate, more productive, healthier, happier people. And that's the point.
And we can shift our addiction from stress to joy.
Absolutely. We want you to get hooked on joy.
Hooked on joy. That's now the subject. Brain-based health, get hooked on joy.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gina.
So, Laurel, thank you again for coming on the show today, for talking about one of the most important conversations, which is burnout, and for doing 40 years of research and work to come to the place where you have created something that someone can use, a lay person can use, the complexities of the brain to, like you said, lay that emotional foundation to bring us more and more joy and more success in our lives. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Gina. It's such a pleasure.
All right, my friends. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to talking to you all again next week. Take care.